Okay, the Irish fuel protests have now entered the fifth day, and Ireland's about to run out of fuel. Now, something I didn't cover yesterday is Ireland's reliance on fuel imports. Not just for business and consumer with filling up your car or your lorry or your van or your tractor, but also for energy production as well. They do have renewables in Ireland like wind power and solar power and hydroelectric power, but problem is the agricultural industry is heavily diesel reliant. Haulage firms, they transport a higher percentage of their goods by road than rail than other European countries with the rail network. There are freight depots, and freight is transported by rail in Ireland, but not on the same percentage as here in the UK or continental Europe. And that is a very noticeable thing. They're more reliant on road transportation for goods to reach market than other countries. So this blockade of Dublin and the other major cities like Limerick and Waterford and Wexford and Cork, for example, is having more of an impact in basically shutting the country down than other countries, because they can get the goods onto rail freight and move it in containers, and that's goods coming into the country and goods being exported out of the country, because Ireland does export a lot of products. It's an agricultural their agricultural sector does export a lot to other countries. Another issue is the border with Northern Ireland, that's the UK. In previous years, when the exchange rate is favourable to the pound over the euro, a lot of locals in the north of the Republic will cross the border for their fuel and shopping because it's cheaper to go into Northern Ireland to fill up your car, buy your shopping, and then go home. And that's a known fact. That's been going on for a long time. Now, at the moment, fuel prices and prices in the supermarkets are at a similar level, slightly below. So if you've got fuel to get across the border to then fill up to come back, you're not making as much of a saving as you think now. But in years past, that has been a saving that's been made in the Euro era. So since 2002, a lot of people have done that over the last 20 or so years. Have hopped across the border, do a bit of cheaper shopping, and then come back because the exchange rate was favourable. Now the pound against the euro is nearly even. It's still slightly in the pound's favour, but nowhere near what it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But that was a known thing. When prices were going up in Ireland for whatever reason, just hop across the border, get things cheaper, come back, and you've got money in your pocket that you otherwise wouldn't have if you stay local shopping. Now, the Irish government have made some poor decisions. The Celtic Sea oil and gas field, for example, not being exploited for Ireland's benefit to make Ireland a net energy exporter. Ironically, that would actually work in their favour. They're not doing it. Very similar to our situation with the Shetland oil and gas field and the North Sea, where we're more reliant on Norwegian oil and gas than producing our half of it. No sovereign wealth fund in that regard. But Ireland its geography counts against it. It's an island. A lot of stuff has to come by sea. In fact, the majority of stuff has to come by sea, even to the north, in Northern Ireland. So they are heavily reliant on commercial shipping and ferries to get a lot of goods in, and that includes fuel. That does include fuel. Now, there's still the threat that Micheál Martin, the Irish Taoiseach, could put the army on the streets. I would think in order for that martial law to be enacted, that would have to go to a vote in the Irish Dáil, which is the Parliament, and I think the Irish President would also have to have some signing off on that, because that is an unprecedented step. These have been peaceful protests. A lot of members of the public, from what I can gather looking at social media and mainstream media, and I've been very careful of where I got my sources from because I've watched Virgin News, RTE. I've even followed the British mainstream news, newspapers. I've been looking at the various things, and then I've been following what various people on social media have been posting, because it's coming up in my newsfeed. This is a very social media driven movement. There's a lot of YouTube channels that are covering it. A lot of members of the public are joining in the protests. This is starting to reach a point where it could actually topple the Irish government. Now, if the soldiers are put on the streets and martial law is declared, that is a watershed moment. I said yesterday that would be a watershed moment that Ireland as a republic, as an independent country, has not seen since the 1920s. Is military men armed on the streets of the country since the Irish Civil War. That just hasn't happened, and we are, as I say, at a watershed moment. This protest movement, I think, does have the potential to topple the Irish government. They're not handling the situation very well. Other countries have brought in fuel rationing, 4-day weeks, tax relief. They've slashed fuel duty, like Poland. Thailand and Malaysia, I know they're in Southeast Asia, but they brought in 4-day working weeks and fuel rationing to keep their economies going and to keep their essential industries going. Ireland hasn't done that. And prices continue to rise. There are shortages on shelves. Farmers aren't getting their goods to market. Their fruit, the vegetables, the meat, the dairy, it's not getting to market. So that means food is sat in warehouses now rotting. Quite literally, because there's only so long you can refrigerate certain food items for before it goes bad. There are laws in place and food regulations in place that limit the amount of preservatives you can put into food products if they have a short shelf life before you have to chuck them away. So this is reaching a point where, as long as public support for the protests remains between 80 and 90%, the protests are going to continue. When public support starts to turn against them, that's where we might start to see some concessions from the protesters. But at the moment, the protesters are actually winning this battle of wills. The Irish government isn't. They're not winning public opinion. The threat of putting soldiers on the streets, I don't think, has gone down well in a country that's traditionally very military neutral. And the army doesn't have a massive role in day-to-day life. In other countries have a different relationship with their military. And Ireland's not at a state of war. So for them to introduce martial law would be a big step, because the protests have been peaceful. Very peaceful. Now, if the military is put on the streets, that could completely change the situation. It could start to turn nasty. And as I mentioned in yesterday's video, that would be a very unprecedented step for a democratically elected government to do in peacetime. So we shall see what happens, but they've entered the 5th day and Ireland's about to run out of fuel. So we shall see what happens, but I think if these protests continue, it could spread across Europe. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts in the comments section below. We'll have some more content for you all very, very soon.